The list was written on a yellow legal pad, torn off at the top, and slid across my own kitchen counter like I was the help. "Bathrooms first," Cole said, not even looking up from his phone. "Then the laundry. There's a lot of it, and we're gonna need real groceries by tonight, not the rabbit food you keep around." 7 things on that paper, numbered. My stepson had numbered them. "You can knock most of it out before lunch if you start now," he added. I picked the list up, read it twice, and felt something go very quiet inside me. Not loud, not shaking. Quiet, the way a lake goes flat, right before the weather turns. I didn't argue. I didn't tell him whose name was on the deed to the house he was standing in. I just folded the paper in half, set it back down, and said, "Okay." 3 days later, that one word cost him $11,000, and the best summer he thought he had coming. Before I tell you how a torn-off page of chores turned into the worst week of Cole's year, do me one small favor. If you've ever been treated like furniture in a room you paid for, hit that subscribe button right now, because this whole channel is for people who finally stopped saying sorry for taking up space. Tap it. Then come back and watch a grown man learn what a reservation calendar is. My name is Tessa. I was 31 that summer, and the house on Tamarack Lake was mine. Not ours, not the family's, mine, down to the last cedar shingle and the crooked little nail I bent, putting up the porch swing my second year there. People hear lake house and they picture money that was handed to somebody, a trust fund, a rich dad. That wasn't my story. My grandmother Esther left me a little when she passed, the spring I turned 19. Not a fortune. Enough to matter to a kid who'd been working since she was 15. I'd been running a small business out of my dorm by then, printing wedding invitations and custom stationery, the kind of thing people laughed at until the orders started stacking up faster than I could fill them. By 24, I had real savings, Grandma Esther's money sitting untouched in a separate account, and a stubborn idea that wouldn't leave me alone. The property came up for almost nothing because nobody wanted it. The old A-frame on the water had a caved-in section of roof, a dock half sunk into the shallows, and a wasp nest the size of a basketball in the eaves. The realtor actually tried to talk me out of it. "Sweetheart," she said, "this is a teardown. I bought it anyway." Cash and a small loan, both in my name only. Then I spent 6 years bleeding for it. Every dollar that business made went back into that house. New roof, one weekend at a time, with a contractor named Dale, who taught me how to swing a hammer without breaking my thumb. The dock, rebuilt board by board, my legs in cold water up to the knee in May. The stone around the fireplace, hauled bucket by bucket from a quarry 40 minutes north, set by hand over 3 summers. Esther's old canoe, the cedar strip one she used to paddle me around in when I was small, sanded down and re-varnished until it glowed like honey, hanging on the boathouse wall where I could see it from the kitchen window. That house wasn't decoration. It was the proof of every single thing I'd done when people told me I couldn't. The canoe mattered most of all, and I should tell you why, because it explains everything that happened later. Grandma Esther raised me more than my own parents did. They were the kind of people who were always somewhere else, chasing the next thing. Esther was the one who showed up. Summers, she'd load me into that cedar strip canoe at 6 in the morning, before the lake woke up, before the boats and the noise, and we'd paddle out to the middle of the water where everything went still and silver. She taught me how to read weather off the surface, how to feather a paddle so it didn't drip, how to sit quietly with a person and not need to fill the air. "Most people are too loud to hear anything, Tessie," she told me once. "The mist coming off the water around us. The lake will tell you what's coming, but only if you shut up long enough to listen." She was gone the spring I turned 19. The canoe sat in a relative's barn for years, forgotten, the wood drying out and cracking. When I finally got it back and saw the state of it, I cried in a way I hadn't let myself cry at the funeral. Then I spent 3 summers bringing it back to life. Every strip of cedar I touched, I thought about those mornings. So when I say the canoe was the most important object in that house, understand, that I'm not talking about a boat. I'm talking about the only person who ever bothered to really know me. Keep that in mind for Thursday. It'll matter. By the time I turned 29, the place was beautiful, and it was making money. I'd licensed it as a vacation rental, registered the whole thing as a real business, Tamarack Hollow LLC, with a county permit taped inside the pantry door, and a booking calendar I checked every morning with my coffee. Weekends went for a small fortune in peak season. Families came up from Chicago and Detroit and paid happily for the dock and the quiet and the canoe rides at dusk. One of those families was a man named Adam and his teenage son. That's how I met my husband. He booked my house. Funny how that detail mattered later. Adam came up for a long weekend the summer I was 29, a tall, easygoing structural engineer with sad eyes and a kid who barely spoke to him. His marriage had ended a few years before. He'd booked the lake house to try to reconnect with Cole, who was 19 then, and made it very clear he'd rather be anywhere else. I almost didn't notice Adam the first weekend. I noticed him the third, when he'd booked again, alone this time, and asked if the woman who restored the canoe would maybe want to take it out and tell him how she did it. We paddled out past the point. He listened to me talk about varnish for an hour, like it was the most interesting thing he'd ever heard. We married 2 years later, the spring before that summer. A small thing on the dock, 20 people, Grandma Esther's canoe decorated with wildflowers behind us. Adam knew exactly what the house was. He'd paid to stay in it, after all. We'd talked about it before the wedding, the grown-up way, with a lawyer in the room. The house stayed mine, the business stayed mine. He had his own money, his own work, and zero interest in claiming a square inch of Tamarack Hollow. "It's yours," he'd said simply. "You bled for it. I just got lucky enough to be a guest." Cole never got that memo, or he got it and tore it up. To Cole, I was the girl his dad married, the young one, the one who'd somehow tricked a 40-something engineer into a wedding, and who lived in a fancy lake house that, in his head, was clearly Dad's, because what 20-something woman owns a place like that on her own? He never asked. That was the whole problem in one sentence. In 3 years, Cole never once asked me how I came to own the house his friends would soon be wrecking. People who've decided you don't matter don't waste time on questions. There'd been signs all along, if I'm honest. Little ones I let slide because I didn't want to be the wicked stepmother in his story. The first Thanksgiving after the wedding, Cole introduced me to a cousin as my dad's wife, and then, lower, when he thought I'd walked away, the young one. At Christmas, he gave Adam a thoughtful gift and handed me a gift card he'd clearly grabbed at a gas station on the drive up, still in the plastic sleeve. When I mentioned once at dinner that I ran the rental business myself, he said, "Oh, that's cute," like a side hustle, and changed the subject to his fantasy football league. Each time, I let it go. Esther's voice in my head, telling me to be the still water and not the splash. I told myself he was young, that he'd been through his parents' divorce, that warmth couldn't be forced. All of that was true. But here's the thing I've learned since. Being patient with someone's disrespect long enough teaches them it's free. I'd spent 3 years quietly paying for Cole's manners, and that summer the bill came due. That summer the trouble started with a phone call I wasn't even on. Adam had taken a 4-month contract overseas, a big bridge job in Norway, the kind of thing that comes once in a career and pays for 2. He left in May. We video called most nights, him squinting into a phone at midnight his time, me on the porch with the loons going crazy out on the black water. Cole called his dad in early June, and from what I pieced together later, the conversation went something like this. Cole wanted to spend the summer at the lake house with some buddies before his last year of college. Adam, tired and 6 time zones away, and wanting to feel like a good father, said it sounded fine. He'd check with me. The house was mine, to say yes or no. Cole heard fine. He stopped listening at fine. He didn't check with me, he didn't call, The first I knew of it was the sound of an overloaded Jeep crunching up my gravel drive on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 young men spilling out of it with duffel bags and a case of beer, and the specific loudness of guys who think they own the place. I was on the dock when they came. I walked up, wiping my hands on my shorts, and Cole greeted me by tossing his bag onto my porch and saying, "Hey, we're gonna take the big rooms upstairs. You're cool down here, right?" Not hello, not is this okay, just an assignment of territory in my own home. His friends I'd never met. Trey, big and grinning, the kind of grin that's used to getting away with things, and a quieter one they called Bishop, who at least had the decency to look a little embarrassed. They tracked lake mud across my floors and opened my refrigerator without asking, and stood there drinking my iced tea like a hotel had laid it out for them. I want to be honest about that first afternoon, because if I tell you I was calm, you won't believe the rest. I wasn't calm. My heart was going. There's a particular kind of anger that arrives when someone treats your life's work like a free Airbnb, and it doesn't feel like fire. It feels like cold water closing over your head, but I'd learned something, somewhere in those 6 years of fixing a broken house alone. Loud feelings make bad decisions. Quiet ones make good plans. So I said, "Make yourselves at home," and watched Cole's shoulders relax, because to him, that meant he'd won. He hadn't won anything, he'd just made it easy for me to watch. The chore list came the next morning. I'd been up since 6, like always, coffee on the porch, calendar open on my laptop, and there it was. The reason this whole thing was about to go very differently than Cole imagined. A booking, a real one. The Okafor family, 2 parents and 3 kids, arriving that Friday for 9 nights, paid in full, $4,200, sitting in my account since April. Cole and his friends had moved into a house that had paying guests coming in 72 hours. He didn't know that. He came downstairs around 10, yawning, scrolling, and slid that torn-off legal pad page across the counter at me like I was somebody he employed. Bathrooms, laundry, groceries, numbered 1 through 7. "You can knock most of it out before lunch," he said, and I said okay. Here's what saying okay actually meant. It meant I stopped trying to fix the situation with words, which never works on a person who's already decided you're beneath the conversation. It meant I stopped managing his comfort and started, very quietly, managing my house like the business it was. I went inside, but not to clean a single bathroom. I opened the closet in my office, the one with the good lock, and I took out the property folder. Deed, my name, just mine, no second name anywhere on it. The LLC registration, the county rental permit, the Okafor reservation, printed. I set them all in a neat stack on my desk, not to wave at anybody yet, just so they were ready. Then I did 3 things, and I want you to notice that not one of them involved raising my voice. First, I texted the Okafors to confirm their Friday check-in, 3 o'clock, and asked if they had any allergies for the welcome basket. They wrote back within the hour, thrilled, sending a photo of 3 kids in matching swimsuits, already counting down the days. Second, I called Dale, my old contractor, the one who'd taught me to swing a hammer, and asked if he could come Thursday morning to look at some wear and tear. He said sure. I'd need a witness who knew the house, and I'd need an estimate I could trust. Third, I started writing things down. Times, dates, damage, every glass left to shatter on my stone hearth, every cigarette burn that appeared on my deck railing, every muddy footprint on the rug Esther had hooked by hand. I wasn't being dramatic. I was building a record, the way you build anything that has to hold weight later. The boys treated those 2 days like spring break. Beer cans multiplied on the dock, music thudded across the water until 2 in the morning, the kind that makes the loons go silent, and the neighbors' lights flick on across the cove. Trey backed the Jeep over my flower bed and laughed about it. They ate everything in the kitchen and left the wrappers, then complained, to me, that there was nothing to eat. Wednesday morning, my neighbor Hank came around the cove in his little fishing boat and cut the motor by my dock. Hank, 76, lives alone in the green cabin across the water and has known me since the summer I bought the place, and he watched me try to rebuild a dock with no idea what I was doing. "Everything okay over here, Tess?" he asked, squinting up at me. "Heard music till near 3. Saw some boys out on the water in your grandma's canoe last night, hollering. Didn't seem right, so I kept an eye out." I told him the short version. My stepson and his friends, uninvited, treating the place like a party house. Hank's jaw tightened. "You want me to come say something?" "I've got a voice on me when I need it." "No," I said. "But thank you. It helps just knowing somebody saw." It helped more than he knew. A witness who'd watched the whole thing, who'd seen the canoe out on the water in the dark, was worth more than any argument I could have made. I wrote his name on my list with the rest. After Hank motored off, I went inside and did something I should have done the first afternoon. I pulled up my own rental agreement, the one every guest signs, and read the section I'd written years ago with my lawyer. Unauthorized occupants. Liability for damage. The owner's right to remove anyone using the property without a confirmed reservation. Then I called my insurance company and asked, hypothetically, what was covered when guests, let's say family, caused damage during an unbooked stay. The woman on the phone walked me through it. I took notes on all of it. By Wednesday night, I knew exactly where I stood. On paper, in writing, with a witness across the cove. Cole still thought this was about towels and laundry, and the whole time, Cole kept handing me jobs. "We're out of towels. The grill's dirty. Can you do that before we get back?" "Tess, somebody clogged the toilet upstairs. That's kind of your thing, right?" "Tess." He'd started calling me Tess, short and dismissive, like I was a college roommate who'd missed rent. I said okay to all of it, and did none of it, and the not doing drove him crazier than any argument would have. By Wednesday night, the upstairs bathrooms were a disaster, and the laundry he'd assigned me sat in reeking piles, and Cole stood in the kitchen genuinely baffled, like a vending machine had eaten his dollar. "Did you even do anything today?" he asked. "I had a busy day," I said, which was true. I'd spent it on the phone with my insurance company and reading the section of my rental agreement about unauthorized occupants. He shook his head like I was a disappointment. "Dad's gonna hear about how lazy you've been all summer." I almost laughed. "Almost? I'll bet he is," I said. That night, Adam called like he always did, his face tired and pixelated on my porch in the dark, a hard hat still on his head from a long shift. "How's the house?" he asked. "Cole behaving?" I had the whole thing right there on my tongue. The chore list, the beer cans, the way Trey had run the Jeep over my flowers. Part of me wanted to dump all of it into Adam's lap and let him handle his son from 6 time zones away, but sitting there in the dark, the loons calling out on the water, I heard Esther again. "The lake will tell you what's coming, but only if you stay quiet long enough to listen." This was mine to handle. Not because Adam wouldn't have backed me, he would have, instantly, but because the second I made it Adam's problem, it became a fight between a father and a son, with me standing off to the side, and Cole would walk away, thinking he'd been punished by Dad, instead of having run face first into the truth about whose house he was in. I didn't want to win an argument. I wanted him to understand something, and some things you can only learn by walking into them yourself. "He's Cole," I said, which made Adam laugh, tiredly. "That bad? Nothing I can't manage. Go to sleep. You look wrecked. Love you. Don't let him give you grief." "Never," I said, and meant it in a way he wouldn't understand until Friday. The thing that broke my patience for good happened Thursday at dawn. I came out to the boathouse to check on a leak, and Esther's canoe wasn't on the wall. For a second, I just stood there, looking at the 2 empty hooks, my stomach dropping through the floor. Then I saw it, out on the water, drifting sideways near the reeds, half swamped, and on the beach, Trey and Bishop, soaked and laughing, recounting how they'd taken it out drunk at midnight, how it had flipped like a toy, how funny it was when it filled with water and they had to swim for shore. Cole stood there with a beer. At 7 in the morning, watching his friends laugh about my grandmother's canoe sinking, and he laughed too. I waded in. The water was so cold my breath caught. I got my hands on the gunnel, the wood I'd sanded for 3 summers, and I felt the long, ugly crack running down one side where it had hit the rocks. The varnish I'd babied was scraped raw. One of the cedar strips had split clean through. I pulled it to shore by myself. Nobody helped. They watched me drag 60 pounds of waterlogged canoe up the sand. And Trey said, "Relax. It's just an old boat." I didn't yell. I want you to remember that, because it's the part that matters. I had every reason on earth to scream, and screaming would have felt amazing, and it would have changed nothing. They'd have called me crazy. Cole would have texted his dad about how unstable I was. The story would have become about my reaction instead of their wreckage. So I stood there dripping, holding the boat my grandmother taught me to paddle, and I said, very evenly, "Get it up to the boathouse and set it down gently." Something in my voice made even Trey stop grinning. They carried it up. Then I went inside, dried off, and made a phone call I'd been saving. Dale showed up at 9, just like he'd promised, in his old truck with his clipboard. I walked him through the whole house while the boys slept off their night. And Dale, who has known me since I was a kid with a broken roof and a stubborn streak, got quieter and quieter as we went. The deck railing, scorched. The hearth, chipped. A window screen punched out, the flower bed, flattened, a guest bedroom carpet, stained with something that smelled like fruit punch and regret, and the canoe, cracked down its side. "Tess," Dale said finally, scratching numbers on his pad. "Who did this?" "My stepson and his friends." He looked at me a long moment. "You want the real estimate or the family discount estimate?" "The real one," I said. "Every dollar." He totaled it up. The damage came to a little over $6,000, with the canoe being the biggest line, because real restoration on a vintage cedar strip hull isn't cheap, and Dale knew I'd never accept just buy a new one. 6,000 in repairs, but I wasn't done adding, because there was something Cole had forgotten or never understood the whole time he was treating me like staff. He wasn't a guest in his dad's house. He was an unauthorized occupant in a licensed business, and businesses charge for rooms. I sat down at my desk that Thursday afternoon, the property folder open, and I made a list of my own. Cole had handed me a chore list. I was going to hand him an invoice. I itemized it carefully, the way I do everything. 3 rooms, occupied by 3 guests, for what would be 6 nights by the time they left, at my standard nightly rate. Cleaning fee, the flower bed, the screen, the railing, the carpet, and the canoe, full restoration, Dale's real number. When I added it all together, it came to $11,200. I printed it on clean white paper, no anger in it, just numbers, the way a real bill looks. Then I set it on the kitchen counter, exactly where Cole had set his torn yellow page, and I waited for Friday. I almost didn't have to do anything else. The house did it for me, because Friday at 3 o'clock, the Okafors were arriving, and I hadn't told Cole a single thing about it. He found out at noon. I was in the kitchen when he came down, and I'd started cleaning, finally, but not for him. I was getting the house ready for the family who'd paid to be there. Fresh sheets stacked, welcome basket on the counter, my checklist in hand. "What's all this?" Cole asked, eyeing the basket. "Guests," I said. "Checking in at 3, he laughed. "What guests?" "The Okafors, 2 adults, 3 kids. They booked in April, 9 nights. I kept folding a towel. "They'll need the 3 upstairs bedrooms, the ones you're in." The laugh died slow on his face. "What are you talking about? We're staying here." "You're staying in a house that's rented out from Friday," I said. "It's been on the calendar since spring. You'd have known if anyone had asked me before showing up. This is my dad's house." And there it was, the whole lie he'd been living in, said out loud at last. I set the towel down, walked to the counter, picked up the property folder, and for the first time all week, I let him see it. "Cole," I said, I need you to actually look at this, because you've never once asked, and it's time you knew. I laid it out. The deed, my name alone, dated 5 years before I ever met his father, the bill of sale, the LLC, the rental permit, the Okafor reservation, paid in full. Your dad booked this house as a guest the summer he met me, I said. He paid $400 a night to stay where you've been sleeping for free. He has never owned 1 inch of it, because I bought it and rebuilt it with my own money before he was ever in the picture. This isn't your dad's lake house. It never was. It's my business, and you and your friends have been squatting in it during peak season. The color went out of his face, the way it does when a person's whole story about themselves cracks at once. You can't just kick me out, he tried. I'm family. I'm not kicking out family, I said. I'm checking out occupants so paying guests can check in. There's a difference, and you'll feel it by 3 o'clock. Then I slid the white paper across the counter to him, into the exact spot where his yellow chore list had sat 3 mornings before. You gave me a list, I said. Here's mine. He picked it up. I watched his eyes go down the numbers, the rooms, the cleaning, the flower bed, the canoe, the total at the bottom. $11,000? His voice cracked on it. You're insane. For what? An old boat and a flower bed? For the boat my grandmother taught me to paddle, that your friends sank for a laugh, I said quietly. For 6 nights, 3 rooms, at the rate any other guest would pay. For the railing and the carpet and the screen. It's all itemized. Dale did the estimate this morning, and he's honest to a fault. Every number on there is real. I'm not paying this. That's between you and your father, I said. But you're all out by 2:30, because the Okafors don't deserve to walk into a house full of beer cans and your laundry. So you've got 2 hours. I'd start packing. He called Adam. Of course he called Adam. That was the whole plan in his head, wasn't it? Run to Dad. Dad fixes it. Dad tells the young wife to calm down. He put it on speaker, I think to embarrass me, standing in the middle of my kitchen so I'd hear his father take his side. It did not go the way he planned. Dad, Cole said, fast and high, Tessa's freaking out. She's kicking us out of the house and trying to charge me 11 grand for nothing. She sank my whole summer. You need to talk to her. There was a pause on the line, the long, expensive 6 time zones pause of a tired man on a job site doing math in his head. Cole, Adam said. Did you sink Esther's canoe? Cole blinked. What? No, Trey did. It was an accident. It's just a... Don't. Adam's voice was very flat, and I'd never loved him more than in that second. That canoe is the most important object in that house, and you know it. I've watched Tessa polish it like it's made of glass. Whose name is on the deed, Cole? Silence. You don't know, do you? Adam said. 3 years. You never bothered to learn the first thing about her. So let me tell you, since you're standing in her house, that place is hers. All of it. I paid to vacation there before I ever asked her on a date. She built that business with her own 2 hands while you were in high school deciding she was a gold digger, and you brought your friends and trashed it like it was a frat house. Dad, whatever she's charging you, you're paying it, Adam said. Every cent. If you can't, you'll work it off, and I'll make sure you do. And you're going to apologize to her like a man, and then you're going to get out of her house before her guests arrive. Am I clear? I won't pretend I didn't feel something warm and fierce go through me, hearing that, but I kept my face still. This wasn't about being rescued. I'd already handled it before Adam said a word. It just meant something that the one person who knew the whole truth refused to let the lie stand. Cole hung up. He didn't look at me for a long minute. Then, quietly, the entitlement draining out of him in real time, he said, I didn't know. I know you didn't, I said. You decided you already understood me, so you never asked. That's a habit that's going to cost you a lot more than $11,000 over your life if you don't break it. That landed somewhere. I could see it land. They packed in 90 minutes, Trey grumbled. Bishop, the quiet one, actually stopped on his way out, looked at the canoe up on its hooks, and said, I'm really sorry. That was a beautiful boat. We were idiots. Of the three of them, he was the only one I'd have back. The Jeep crunched down the drive at 2:15, 45 minutes before the Okafors turned in. 3 kids hanging out the windows, already shrieking about the water. I had the house spotless by then. I'd spent the last hour the way I always do before a check-in, moving through the rooms one by one, fluffing pillows, wiping down counters, setting a jar of wildflowers on the kitchen table the way Esther used to, welcome basket on the counter, local jam and a handwritten note. Beds turned down, Esther's canoe back on the wall where it belonged, cracked but home, waiting for Dale to make it whole again. When the Okafors pulled in at 3 on the dot, I watched their kids tumble out of the car and stop dead, staring at the lake like they'd never seen water before. The youngest, a little girl maybe 6, looked up at me and asked, completely serious, "Is this whole lake ours?" "For the next 9 days," I told her, "this whole dock is yours." Her dad shook my hand and said the photos online didn't do it justice. The mom stood on the porch breathing it in, and I felt the thing I always feel when the right people walk into that house, the people who treat it like the gift it is. Pride, clean and quiet. That was the whole point of everything I'd built. Not to be used, to be shared, with people who knew the difference. The Okafors had the best 9 days. The kids learned to paddle, carefully, in a different boat, with me holding the dock line. The mom left a review that made me cry a little. The house did exactly what I'd built it to do. Here's the part people always want to know, the after. Cole paid. Not all at once, because a college kid doesn't have $11,000, but he paid. Adam set it up so it came out of the allowance he'd been giving Cole, and the rest Cole worked off at Dale's, of all places, hauling lumber and learning, I suspect, more about respect from a 60-year-old contractor than he ever learned from me. The canoe got fixed. Dale and I did it together over the fall, the way I'd done everything to that house, one careful weekend at a time. It hangs on the boathouse wall now with a faint seam down one side where the cedar was rejoined. I left the seam visible on purpose. Some repairs should show. They're proof you can break a beautiful thing and still bring it back, if you're willing to do the slow work. Cole came up the following summer, by himself. He knocked, which he'd never done before, and waited to be let in, which he'd never done before either. He actually asked, if he could stay a few days. He spent one of them helping me restain the dock, on his knees in the cold water, not complaining once. We're not close exactly, but somewhere in there, he started asking me questions about the business, about how I'd bought the place at 24. About Esther. One evening that next summer, I found him in the boathouse, just standing there, looking at the canoe on its hooks. He ran a finger along the seam where Dale and I had rejoined the cedar. "Does it still float?" he asked. "After we, better than ever," I said. "Want to take it out?" We paddled out past the point, the same water Esther used to take me, the sun going down gold over the trees. He was quiet for a long time, working the paddle the way I'd shown him, getting the feathering wrong and then right. "I'm sorry," he finally said. "Not for the money, for the 3 years before the money. I never even tried to know you." "I know," I said. "That's all I ever wanted. The trying. The asking was the whole thing. It always had been. If you've made it this far, you already know somebody like the old Cole, and maybe you've been the person handed a list of chores in a room you paid for, told to be grateful for the privilege of being used. So let me ask you straight. Subscribe to this channel, because every story here is for the people who got tired of saying okay and meant it the way I meant it on that yellow legal pad. Your quiet patience is not the same thing as permission, and the people who confuse the two are counting on you to never correct them. Here's what that whole summer taught me, and I'll give it to you plain, no speech. When someone hands you a list of who they've decided you are, you don't have to argue with it. Arguing tells them you need their agreement. You don't. You just keep living as the person you actually are, Keep your records clean, keep your boundaries quiet and real, and let the truth arrive on its own schedule. It always does. It came for Cole at 3 o'clock on a Friday, in the shape of a family who'd paid for the rooms he thought he owned. The people who treat your life like it's free are reading your silence as a yes. It doesn't have to be. Sometimes the strongest thing you'll ever say is one calm word, said while you quietly get everything in order, and then you let the lake go flat, and you wait for the weather you already knew was coming. My name is Tessa. The house on Tamarack Lake is mine, and I never picked up that chore list again.